Nun test, yeah. Thank the Parnes HaShana, the Shiur's Reuven, nishmat, Gdalya, Rabbi Shimon, Ayekah. Okay, it's been a long time, and the question is still a valid question, Ayekah. Maybe more than ever before. Page Nun Test. Page Nun Test. The truth is that so much has changed since the last time we learned this, and one of the most obvious results of what's been taking place is that there are many, many, many more Jews who are asking this question, or hearing the question of Ayekah, and trying to come to terms with their own identity. And we have to do that. All of us have to do that. And that's our avodah now. When we engage in this avodah of responding to the question of Ayekah, Mimela, our emunah is a different emunah, our bitachon is a different bitachon. So let's resume our limud. Hayisod hazeh merkazi ma'od l'b'doreinu. This yisod, which is based upon the Torah that we're learning from Rav Kook, of Ani B'Soich HaGola, that the Navi says that I, the true I of who I am, is in this state of Golas, in this Ani Ha'atzmi, this loss of the Ani Ha'atzmi, and trying to regain it. This Yisod is very central to in particular to our generation. Everything that's happening around us, what we've been talking about, and this whole galus of sinis Yisrael, of anti-Semitism, and the strange steer between an insistence upon free speech, about only certain things to be able to speak freely and other things not to be able to speak freely. The whole bilbul when it comes to the definition of freedom, what it means to be free. Free to do what? What does that mean, freedom? So, in our times, he says, "Yesh baruchos kosher shemanashvos kivyachol b'shem acheres b'chalfish." There are very powerful winds that are blowing kivyachol in the name of freedom, cherus and chofesh. B'tonos shehane'amonus l'Torah u'lemitzvos mitzamtzemes es hachofesh shel ha'adam. And actually, this isn't anything new, but it's particularly strong in our times. These supporters, these believers in man's freedom, their taina is that being a Jew who's faithful to Torah mitzvahs is mitzamtzem the chayfish of a person. It restricts one's freedom. It's the opposite of being free. It's subjecting yourself to the whim and the will of some higher force and surrendering your freedom, giving up your freedom. You're not free. So this has been a taina from the beginning, but obviously it became a much greater taina over the past 200, 250 years, as man began to discover and to exercise a certain freedom of will that he never had in the past. That for the first time in history, people over the past few hundred years were able to, in a certain place, not everywhere, not in Gaza, but in the light of the change that took place, beginning in Europe and then America and so on, where people could actually express themselves. They could say what's on their minds, and they're free to not only to speak about what they wanted, but they're free to go where they want. They're free to practice whatever religion they want to, or not to practice. So with all of this freedom that man never had, so many woke up and said, well, now that we're free of all of these shackles, of all the chains of the monarchy, of the Vatican and so on, so this longing for freedom spread and spread and spread, and which is a healthy instinct, of course, which we're talking about. It's a very healthy instinct, the longing for chayus, for true chayus, for freedom. But obviously that has affected and infected many Jewish minds as well. With the question, am I truly free? I'm not free. I had to get up this morning and go to Slichus. I had to get up. It's hard enough to get up every day for me. There's 20 minutes earlier today. If I were truly free, I would still be in bed. And so it is with all Mrs. Hassay and all Mrs. Leisasay. So the feeling is that Torah and mitzvahs is mitzamtzemus is a chayv. The Torah and mitzvahs restricts and constricts. Yesh lahavin sheshorish hagira mol gishas elu. We have to make it very clear that the shorish of clarifying this sugya does not revolve around the question, as I said a moment ago. It's not a question of whether freedom is something which is a positive, or the longing for freedom, is that a positive instinct, or is it something which is negative? It's not a question that it's positive. That's not the shaila. The shaila is not whether freedom is a good thing or a bad thing. Those klal lo hashaila. It's bechlal not the question. And many try to present this whole question of religion in our times, Yiddishkeit, or Lahavdil Alf Avdolas, other religions, to try to present the question in our times as revolving around this nakuda. The nakuda is man truly free. And how does religion restrict one's personal freedom? So there are many who try to present the vikuach, the debate over belief and faith. They try to present it in this misgaret, in this framework. That those who insist upon being faithful to Torah mitzvahs are restricting or removing a person's freedom. I mean, kids feel that all the time. From the very beginning, they feel that. When Yiddishkeit, in the earlier years, when Yiddishkeit was much more natural to the community, it was just it was accepted as a universal way of life in the old kehilas. Of course, there were always some renegades, but to a large extent, it was the exclusive way of life of Jews, whether Sfardish or Ashkenaz. Again, until the past couple of hundred years, it was the exclusive way of life, and the same way that a child grew up understanding that this is what we eat, this is where we sleep, this is how we make a living, and so on, and this is our life. So it was part of the list of those instincts was religion, was faith. But over the past few hundred years, and it's definitely accelerated over recent years, we can't take that for granted anymore. The kids are growing up feeling, in all communities, because there's no longer possible to insulate the kids, so they're growing up feeling that Yiddishkeit to a great extent is an imposition upon their freedom. It's taking away their freedom. It's suffocating them. And you'll have 8-year-old kids now. This happened where a mother told me that the 8-year-old kid was warning her that he's going to go off the derech if she doesn't stop asking him to go to daven. He already warned her. I'm considering going off the derech. So this was now she's been disarmed. She doesn't know what to do. I'm not only about davening. Maybe if I upset him at all, like if I tell him to go to bed, he'll go off the derech. If I tell him to brush his teeth, I might, he might go off the derech, and I can't afford one of those special yeshivas. Regular yeshivas are expensive enough. The special ones are a fortune. So I better not tell my kid to brush his teeth. He's going to go off the derech. And the kids, there is this feeling that Yiddishkeit is an artificial limb that's been sewn onto me, that's been implanted, but it's not who I am. It's not who I am. And those of us who grew up with the last generation, and those Jews that for whom Yiddishkeit was what they breathed, what they ate, what they lived, they didn't question. There were, of course, always those who did, but to a large extent, it was accepted that our freedom is limited. But all that democracy has been selling for these years, and we're watching the corruption of that and the unraveling of that in the universities now. It's not now. This has been going on for many years already. For many years, is the abuse of what that freedom means, and a complete misunderstanding of freedom, and that's why it's possible to have such a strange matzav where the same people whose entire mahus, whose entire existence is based upon freedom of speech, l'mashal, that doesn't apply to if you're somebody who likes Trump, or I'm not saying whether one should or one shouldn't, or whether it doesn't apply when it comes to words suggesting or promoting, I hate to use the word, it's so popular now, genocide, then it doesn't apply. So the same people are saying our whole mitzvah is free speech. You're not allowed to say that a man is a man or a girl is a girl. If you say that, there's something wrong with you. You can't say that. You're not free to say that, but you're free. You're free to call for the death of millions of people. So how did that happen? It's such a perversity. And how is it that, and we're all sitting around wondering, how is it that first of all, why don't they seem to be asking this kasha on how come nobody seems to be asking this kasha except some, conservative, right-wing, all these programs that only Jews watch and some evangelical havdil, they watch these shows. But the rest of the world seems to be saying, no, there's no stira. Of course, freedom of speech. As long as you don't say anything I don't like, you have freedom of speech. How did that happen? So we see that this gift that's called chayrus, that's called freedom, is very easily distorted and historically has been used as a way to destroy civilization, and it's always been that the first victims and the most and the most open target is us. It's always been that way. It's always been that way. This isn't a chiddush what's happening. It's always been like that. And all under the banner of freedom. I mean, that's the whole nusach is free Palestine, which means the destruction of the Jewish people. Free Palestine. So that lashon of freedom, of chayrus, has been used in many wonderful ways, and it freed modern men from the Middle Ages and all that was part of that dark time in history. But at the same time, it has created a different kind of darkness, and it's left men feeling extraordinarily lonely, empty and lonely. This freedom has left Western civilization feeling very, very lonely. So let's try to understand this. It's not about whether freedom is a good thing or a bad thing. The feeling that many have that Yiddishkeit, Torah mitzvahs, takes away my freedom. It doesn't free me up. It doesn't give me freedom. It takes away my freedom. That Yiddishkeit is something which enslaves me. So you could sit by the Seder, you could say, Avodim hayinu l'par Mitzrayim, and now the feeling is that Avodim hayinu l'Kodesh Baruch Hu b'Barapar, on the five towns, or in Yerushalayim, or anywhere. Avodim hayinu, Avodim anachnu achshav. Therefore, those who the way that it appears is that those who are truly supporting chofesh, freedom, who truly believe in freedom, by definition are against Torah mitzvahs, because Torah mitzvahs restricts a person's freedom. Every single moment of our lives, we're being controlled by halacha. Say this, don't say that. Look at this, don't look at that. Walk here, don't walk there. Shabbos, move this, don't move that. Every single second of life is controlled by halacha, by Shulchan Aruch. So that feels to a person with modern sensibilities, that feels like the hypocrisy, the opposite of freedom. Freedom is say whatever you want, go wherever you want to go, do whatever you want. So it seems it's the opposite, it's the hypocrisy. This Nakuda lies at the core of much of the bitterness that's felt by the chevra that are growing up, the kids that are growing up. And it comes out a lot, especially when it comes to all the phones. This is the parents, every single parent, I should say, but many parents have this issue. Probably almost every parent, but just that some that know and some that don't know. But the kids feel that these rules about how much they could be on the phone, what kind of phone, that the parents and the schools have created this terrible totalitarian state where I can't use the phone whenever I want. I can't use the phone whenever I want. And the parents have all these rules and regulations. And so what's happening is the yeshivas have all these rules, they have to. Don't blame them. So the yeshivas have all kinds of rules because they like to educate your kid. So they have all kinds of rules. But at the same time, the kids are unbelievably cynical because they watch their parents day and night on the phones. and they watch people in shul walking around looking at their phones, and they know that to a large extent the people are telling them in school that they're not allowed to have phones, have their own phones, and they're also meshubah to them. So the whole thing just made for more sarcasm and cynicism, and more of a feeling of, look, you know, Rabbi so and so, you know that you're just as meshubah to the phone as I am. So, and then you create these halachas that I can only use the phone, or the kids are thinking with their parents. So my parents made this halacha that I could look on the thing for a half hour. I could play on my phone, or I could text or whatever for a half hour a day. That's the halacha. And they see that their parents sit at the table. They don't even talk to each other the whole time. And they see the men walking around in shul, playing with their phones, looking at their phones, holding their phones, touching their phones, hugging their phones, davening with their phones. But you're not allowed to. So how are they supposed to interpret that? What does that mean? Of course, nobody thinks about it. They think that they're just allowed to make rules for kids, and the kids feel that those rules are restrictive. That's how they interpret the rules. Every rule, it's the nature of an immature person, of a child, to feel that any rule is something anything that he doesn't want to do is restrictive, and it's taking away his freedom. That, together with the hypocrisy that they're surrounded with, has made it an impossible situation. So what's going on is that the school has an official rule, and everybody signs that they're going to give the rule, but then they give a little wink to their kids, and everything's going on, behind the scenes, all kinds of dishonesty and all kinds of games, because of freedom, because of the need for freedom, and our freedom is being restricted by the schools, by my parents. The parents feel that the school's restricting their freedom. The kids feel that the parents and the school is restricting their freedom. So the whole bilbul over what is the meaning of chofesh, of cheres. It's a tremendous bilbul. And how is it possible that you could take some freshman or sophomore or junior or senior and ask, what do you mean by the words free Palestine? What does that mean? And are you aware that you wouldn't be free to be who you would like to be, which might be you're gay? Yes. You're trans? Yes. You're a progressive liberal? Yes. Do you think you'd be free in Palestine to be any of that? It's not even a stira. How's that not a stira? And we're all just wondering, how could that be? Like, how come no one's... And why isn't that a stira? Because the words free Palestine, the word free, doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything, because the whole mohus of the Palestinians is the opposite of freedom. And even the people that are enslaved to Hamas vote for them. They don't have freedom. Or they have this distorted version of freedom. And this has found its way now to Washington, to New York, to London, to Paris, to everywhere in the world. They've managed to infiltrate the entire Western world. So you ask one of these idiotic college students and you might want to throw in something like, that the only actual democracy in the entire Middle East is the place that you want to see destroyed. And then some of them might say, what? That's really one of the more intelligent responses. What? So then you say, well, do you know how life is in Syria and Lebanon and Jordan and Saudi Arabia? Are you familiar with how things are in these places? They never heard of these places. They wouldn't know the same way they don't know how to find Oklahoma on a map. They don't know where Syria is on a map. They don't know what it is. They never heard of it. And she's going over there with a sign, Free Palestine. It's the first thing they would do if she would be there. And the place would be freed. They would finish her off. And it's all b'shem what? chofesh, cherus, freedom. Because by definition, all poor people, or all people of color, they're not free. They're not free. Even in the freest country in the entire world, which is America, they've been free to do whatever they wanted to do. There's been terrible racism in America. We have a history of racism in the past, and it's been a struggle to overcome that. But people are certainly free. A person of color could even become the president of Harvard University if she knows how to plagiarize. Could become the president of the most chashuv university on earth. You're free to do anything you want. But that's not what freedom means. Yesh kan bira amok yoseh. The birur has to be a very deep birur of what that means. To be free. It's much more complicated. It's extremely deep sugya. We're not talking here about being free as opposed to being enslaved in the way that it's used. The real question is the one that Hashem asked in Gan Eden Mikeden. Ayekah. Mihu Adam. Who is man? What is a human being? Mihu Adam. Mahi zahusa mahusa hamitis. What's the true identity? What's the true essence of man? Lo orzos nikva mahu raitza lohaitzi elapal. Based upon understanding man's your own true identity and essence, then actualizing that identity and essence. If you are a great musician, then if you have innate, fantastic musical talent, then you understand that your tachlis is to actualize that talent that you have, to teach or to play music or whatever it might be, or if you're an artist and so on. Because the feeling that you have, the understanding you have, that this is my essence. The essence is I'm a musician, I'm an artist. So if that's your essence, you have some kid, whatever, in college, majoring in physics and failing miserably. And you ask the kid, like, what's with you? So the kid says that my talent is music. I'm a musician. That's who I am. So why are you majoring in physics? Because I was forced to do that. I was enslaved. I'm enslaved. My parents forced me because they wanted me to be a physicist, or they wanted me to be a doctor or something, and I have to take all the sciences. So so it's very, very pashut that if somebody is an artist, it was the most obvious thing is to help to bring out that person's talents, and to be able to succeed in life with being moitzi min hakorach el hapoel, his talent. That would seem to be the most obvious thing, but it's not. But that's really what freedom is. To be free to be yourself. Now the way that that's used, of course, on the college campus it means to be free to be the yourself that your professor has said you are. The way that your professor has defined you. To be free to be myself, enclosed in yourself. Parents do that to the kids all the time. I got a lecture like that once from one of my kids. And it was pretty good. It was a good drasha. It was a good drasha. I didn't disagree. My instincts were to disagree, to defend my turf, but it made sense. I said, you're right. I'm not going to argue with that. It's very easy to slip into that thing of trying to create our children in our own image, and to impose ourselves upon them, and not to recognize who the kid is, and who that kid really, what that kid is really, what's the mahus of that kid, and it's just not to see that, even though you're living in the same house the whole life, you just miss it because you're so wrapped up in your own mahus. So the real question is, based upon who the person be'emes is. If you're an artist, then we have to try to bring that out. And if we crush that, so then the person feels that his life has been ruined. And I mentioned a few times over the years that there was a guy that I knew when I was in yeshiva, not in high school, afterwards. There was a guy that he was unbelievably crazy about cars from the time that he was a kid. I mean, a lot of boys have with cars and young, but he was unbelievable from the time that he was, when he was already like 14 years old. Everybody in shul was giving him their cars to fix. He was able to, you just get me the part and he'll take care of it. He was able to fix it, and he loved doing it. The problem that he had was that both of his parents were very prominent physicians, and they did not let him go. They just did not let him go, and he hanged himself. This boy killed himself. They didn't say that in public, but the friends knew what happened. He had left a note with one of them, and he killed himself. And it's nobody's fault. Everything's fine, and life goes on. So that's a very, very crazy, extreme case. Most kids just die slowly. Not just kids, but adults. They just die. And when you feel that Yiddishkeit is not you, then davening is like dying. Then being frum is like dying. Then keeping Shabbos is like dying. And you can give speeches from Hand bis Morgen about, isn't this fun? Isn't this fun? We get to have chant and sing songs. No. I don't find it so much fun to have some beans and potatoes and sing. But I do. We love this. We've been doing this for thousands of years. You owe it to your grandparents and so on. Everybody was killed by Kodesh Hashem, so we should be able to eat beans and sing. And now you don't want to do this. You don't want to be part of our holy community. No. I have other things I'd like to do. I'm not so interested in the beans and the songs. I'll do something else. Hungarians have beans. Not everybody. I know that not everybody has beans. I'm not so interested in that. I can do something else. Nobody says it like that so clearly, but that's what it is. Mahu writes the Nakuda Pnimis, who writes Allah says Jor, Allah Fia Bechayev. The Nakuda Pnimis of a person is what the person wants to be free to express and to bring out in his life. Nakuda Pnimis. Therefore, if you don't feel that Yiddishkeit is your Nakuda Pnimis, so then you're no different than the young man who did not feel that medicine was his Nakuda Pnimis. He felt that being a mechanic was his Nakuda Pnimis. Of course, what a person does for an occupation, for a living, is not necessarily a question of bringing out your Nakuda Pnimis. It's a question of bringing home some food to put on the table, some bread to put on the table. That's that doesn't have to be an expression of the deepest part of who you are. That's a luxury. If there are people who are able to do that, that's gewaldic. But it's lav davka. You could work just to make a living. Doesn't mean that's who you are, because that's what you do for a living. But there are much deeper things than how you make money, like who you are, and that's the question of whether you're free or not free. Zui and the Kuda Amuka, page Sam. This is the Kuda Amuka. This is truly the deepest Nakuda. The Bira Murka Amok Mod, and to be Mavara within oneself. What is that Nakuda Pnimis? That's already something which is very, very complicated. Sometimes it's not, but it often is. Shadarish Lina Gadol Ma'od, which requires a tremendous amount of learning. Lima Gadol Ma'od, which is what this entire Sefer is about. Ma ze Am Yisrael. Ma ze Am Yisrael. Somebody sent me something where there was a person who this is going on a lot, but there was somebody that was a very, very, very secular Jew who was saying that for the first time in my adult life, I actually thought about this question of what does it mean to be a Jew, and that's my identity, that I'm a Jew. He never thought about it. So it's not just a limud of who you are as an individual Jew, but what's taking place now in the world is a tremendous birur of Maza Am Yisrael. Maza Am Yisrael. Mahi Nishmas Am Yisrael. What is the soul of Am Yisrael? Mahi Nishmas Am Yisrael. Mahi HaKedusha. What is Kedusha? What is this Kedushas Yisrael? Nishmas Yisrael. Well, Mahi HaMitzvahs. And what are these mitzvahs that seem to be so restrictive and so demanding and oftentimes so artificial, strange to me? The more we clarify this, the more this becomes understood and clear. The more it will become very obvious that there's no question here about the importance of chofesh, of freedom. That's not the question. Nobody is that's the whole tachlis of Yitzias Mitzrayim is cherus olam. The Torah is not happy with ahavtias adoini, lo eitzei chavshi. The Torah is not pleased with that way of life. And certainly to be a God-fearing Jew means to be on the side of Abraham Lincoln, even though I think they're throwing down the statues now also. I don't know why. Like, why are they upset with Abraham Lincoln? Probably because he just did better on his SATs. I think that might be it. So there's no question that a person shouldn't be. And the institution of slavery and how does that fit into Am Yisrael? Because of course, we have in the Torah, and anybody who learns every day in learning is never Knani, never different. What does that mean? Certainly, it's not the ideal. So we're not arguing over the importance of chofesh. Ela b'sheila mihu ha'adam. And here's where the confusion sets in. The real question is mihu ha'adam. Just like you tell the kid in school that you live in America, and from the time that we were little kids, we always said America is a free country, and it is, and therefore you're free to do what you want. So then why is this kid taking physics if he wants to fix cars? Why is he taking physics if he wants to fix cars? The physics just makes him feel like a dummy. I never really understood why everybody all the kids have to take math until they things like this or chemistry. What for? No, it sounds a little bit extreme. So then I came up with the answer. The answer is because there are a lot of people that need to make a living by tutoring. That must be it, because otherwise it doesn't seem to make sense. Like, why is it that so many kids are miserable over math, when in the end everybody just gets a computer and a calculator? Nobody adds or subtracts anymore anyway. And even years ago I didn't understand that. I remember thinking about it when I was taking trigonometry. So I've mentioned this in the past. And I was right, because I asked the teacher. I got thrown out of class for asking. We had this guy. So it was just nasty, and it was terrible, like that trigonometry. And I asked. So we were going the whole thing with, I don't know if you know cosines and tangents and like. So I asked the teacher, "Can you show me a logarithm?" That's what I said once in class. I'd like to see one of these. You have one? And he said, I said, and then all my friends, yeah, where's the logarithm? We had like this whole tumult in class. So my mother had to call up. It was all nice. So what's a logarithm? I said, where is a logarithm? I never saw a logarithm. And I said, and I'm never going to see a logarithm the rest of my life, guaranteed. And so far, I mean, I'm not. I hope I have more years to go. I haven't seen one logarithm. I never saw a logarithm. Have any of you seen logarithms? Never saw a logarithm. I guess if you're an architect, they always say if you're an architect. Okay, so I'm not interested in being an architect. So I don't care about musical notes either, because I'm not a musician. So, but I can tell you, Baruch Hashem, I did very well on the Regents, and I did everything. I was a good boy, and I followed all that, and I studied, and I did fine. But I had friends of mine that were dying from it. There were kids in school that were miserable, and their parents couldn't afford it, and they were paying hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. Back then, but there were kids that their parents could not afford it, and they had to pay for tutors, and they never ever going to meet a logarithm. It's all, and so you could be studying all of that and just going along with the crowd because we have to do this. And in school, you could laugh about it, but in life, it becomes much more serious because you end up marrying the wrong person, you end up having the wrong job, you end up raising your kids in a certain way, and your whole life is, and your whole Yiddishkeit is a mess. Because you're totally free, you know. So once you graduated, so now you're free. You don't have to do you passed your regents. You're done. No more logarithms. So now you feel that you're totally free. Life is good. So now I'm free. So why are people so miserable? Why are people so unhappy? They're totally free. You're free to do anything you want. It's America. Be anybody you want to be. And people have never been as miserable. In the past, you were miserable because there was a pogrom, on Thursday. That's something else. But you were able to be a happy farmer. I know a lot of people that would be much happier being farmers. There's actually a boy in yeshiva that became a farmer, and he loves it. So it's a much bigger question, and it's the question that Hashem asked in Gan Eden, and most people in the world are still running away from that question. They're just running away from it, like Adam Rishon hiding in the garden. The question of Ayekah, Mi hu Adam? Shelafi zeh yikova or yikva le'elu arachim u'ma'avayim yitin chovesh u'dror. Because there are a lot of things that a person wants, and a lot of desires that a person has. Freedom doesn't mean to express every desire that you have. You might have a desire to kill somebody. So freedom means, go ahead. V'yuvan gam sh'amabat shel HaTorah mekavin lo seis chofesh l'kol malo shir karmis adam. The essence of our emunah is that the Torah is what facilitates a person finding himself. Not restricts, but it actually points the person in the direction and sets him on a path of self-discovery, not self-denial. But if you don't understand Yiddishkeit in depth, and if you don't learn, especially if you don't learn Panemius, and you don't know what a neshama is, then Yiddishkeit is the road to misery and self-denial, which is what's happening with many of the chevra now, the kids especially. You tell them they have to do these things, but they don't feel that these things speak to them at all, and they don't know why. And if you're kind of a kid that'll make trouble, like the logarithm question, or the kind of and even worse, if you ask a Rebbe, like, why should I do this? Why? I don't feel like doing it. So I had this conversation once with which I wrote about some years ago, that I had a conversation with a Baal Tshuva who was teaching in a very fine yeshiva, who was teaching math or biology, I don't remember, something like that, in a very good yeshiva. And in his class, it came out through conversations with the boys in his class, and he also invited over for Shabbos. He was just a very, very nice guy, this guy. Boys were telling him left and right that they don't believe in Torah Sheba'al Peh at all. They don't believe in Torah Sheba'al Peh. They don't know how. They think, no, somebody made it up. And what he was telling me is that these are boys that, we're not talking about guys that are learning, like, Tzais and the Sivas, Rabbi Kiveger, Steiging, talking, about learning Torah in a very, very, learning Gemara in a very deep level. He said that he had many conversations, that he was just casually talking to these boys, and they told him that he saw they were certainly questioning, many of them were questioning God's existence, and questioning the whole truth of Torah Misinai. And this was just I'm not saying that that's what all Bachim are struggling with, but he said he was like regular guys in yeshiva, and a very good yeshiva. And he went to the principal to talk to the Rosh Yeshiva, the principal, and he went to the headmaster to talk about, like, that he was very taken aback by it. He was very shocked by this. And he said, he suggested that something be done, like to study with them some basics of, and he got such a mishavech. He said, this is not your area, stick to biology. And he said, what? He said that they received that from their parents in the home. But he said to me, what do you mean? But they're not. These boys are miserable. They're studying Gemara all morning, and many of them are very good at it. But then in the afternoon, they're telling me that they're not even sure that they think that comes from Hasinai. They don't even know what it is. And you're telling me that they got this somewhere? That they didn't get it anywhere. So he asked me, like, how could that? He was asking me, I'm a Baal Tshuva, so I asked these questions, and I came to the truth of trying to be observant of Torah mitzvahs. So it's like, how does this go on? How could this happen? I said, it's a good question. It's a very, very good question. But be careful, because you can lose your job. Be careful. You need your job. And it just goes on. So, if a person feels that at some point this kid that might be someone that knows how to learn, and he's steiging, but he has questions, legitimate, fair questions, that he's even afraid to ask. What about if they're not being answered? This Rebbe's going to answer the question. Forget about that. He's even afraid to ask those questions. So they have different ways. this dilemma, it comes out in different ways at some point. Some of them just run away. They just leave Yiddishkeit altogether. Many of them just remain, but because it's their culture and they're used to it, and they just remain. Whatever. Keeping stuff that they, not everything, some things. Hanging out in shul, schmoozing, whatever. Not going to shul at some point. There are many, many people who went to yeshivas or Shem Shabbos that they don't go to shul at all. They don't go to shul at all. People have told me that they haven't davened in years. So what happens is they want to send the kids to yeshivas. So when the kid goes to yeshiva, the wife says, "You got, this is crazy. You got to go to shul." So then he shows up in shul for the first time in years, besides Yom Niraim or something. And again, if this was just something which is isolated, it would be a halbut sorrow. It's not isolated. There are many, many, many who feel stuck in the prison of Yiddishkeit, and they don't see it as a form of self-expression, but as a form of self-denial. And they hold on to it because of many other social, cultural reasons, guilt, psychological, whatever it is. They're holding on to it for other reasons, not because they feel that it's an expression of who they are. It's an extension of myself. But it's just the opposite. It's a rejection of myself. It's a rejection of who I am. And if I would be free, if I would be free. If God wouldn't be watching me today, or if my parents wouldn't know, or if the Rabbi wouldn't find out, or if I wouldn't have to struggle with remorse and guilt, what I would do. And that's the question of who am I? That's the question of who am I? And the question of Ayekah. That's the question. It's not about whether freedom is a good thing. Freedom is a gewaldig good thing. Oz yuvhar shamachloikos ben shtei agishos him atanosen chofesh radud. The real question is freedom, freedom, freedom. So what are you freeing? You're freeing yourself to express the most shallow, disgusting things that are inside of you. Because every human being has all kinds of disgusting things in the dungeon. Strange things in the dungeon. So freedom means free Palestine. Free to behead, to burn, and so on. There are the external expressions or needs or desires of a person, and most of the world, when they say freedom, means free to carry out those desires. The external layers of a person, which in the end are going to fall apart. Machmas hayovis, in other words, you get sick of them. Machmas hayovis shall have pnimis. Because if you're a human being, at some point you become sick and tired and fed up with just living externally, and having the being able to be free to have the fun you wanted to have, which is just carrying out those things that the external part of who you are, the stuff in the basement, the dungeon, that doing that stuff leaves you feeling empty. And that's what I was talking about before, the horrible loneliness and the emptiness that people feel. So how do you use your freedom? You're free. How do you use the freedom? Do you use that just to free up, to liberate the shallow, oftentimes disgusting things inside of you, which will leave you feeling empty and worthless? If you're a person of cheshivas, it'll leave you feeling empty and worthless. If you're an animal, it leaves you feeling great. Or do you use this healthy, natural instinct to be free, to free up the deepest parts of who a person is? Marachas v'chavos, shleimus shalom, the shleimus, man's greatness. V'chol malo shiur kamoso. All of the greatness that a human being, and especially a Jew, is able to accomplish. How do you use the freedom that was given to you? How do you use that? So, democracy is a tremendous step forward, but at the same time, it's unleashed. It's unleashed. Horrible, frightening darkness from the dungeons of the people who are now free. They're free to do whatever they want. What do you want? So there are different madregas. There's a wanting that's pneumius. There's a wanting that's chitzonius. And if you believe that the freedom that you have is to carry out just what your chitzonius is talking about, then you have churban. If the freedom is the freedom to learn about, to understand, to explore, and to draw out in your life the essence of who you are, that's cheres. That's called cheres. That's the emes. That's the truth. What cheres is. Okay, Mr. Shem, to be continued. What?
On that happy note.
It's a happy note. So, B'Tevis, you want to be completely happy? Shabbos.